he was nominated for an Oscar but didn't win. And there were 3 other nominations as well. And so it got a lot of notices. First thing that impressed me about the film was how willing he was to act in a humiliating role. I mean, the guy is an alcoholic. He's a stumbling, fall down drunk who's hitting bottom. And the whole case, the whole story is about how he uses this for his own redemption, but it fails. So I didn't even move my notes into my room. Just tell me your first impressions and then we'll dive in, because it's really about everybody's got something to hide. Everybody's deceptive. Everybody tells lies, thinking it's for a better cause or a good cause. And, you know, the questions it makes me ask is, what is justice? What is truthfulness? And it's just so hard to do the right thing, you know, and be pure about it. Maybe purity just escapes us as human beings. So, Steve, what were your impressions of the film?
Well, I enjoyed it. It's sort of fun to looking at an old melodramatic
Yeah, it's old school
movie. I mean, you got, as a lawyer, you look past the multitude of legal flaws in it, right, that are not realistic. You know, you just accept it for what it is. But it's fun. I mean, I enjoyed it. It's dated. I mean, you know, they kind of hit you over the head with the good and the bad and the moralistic things. But I guess I kind of like my movies a little nowadays, anyways.
Well,
a little more subtle.
Yeah, I think the way to see this film is for its time, 40 years ago.
Yeah,
David Mamet, who wrote the script for the director, is a very ham-fisted, in-your-face kind of writer, and he's off in the extreme world of Orthodox Judaism, and God knows what he is. He's a bit of a kook these days.
Mamet, you mean? Oh,
David Mamet, yeah. And but there's some great moments in it and great lines, and I think the structuring is very good, and that's what appealed to me about it, was how there's a theme running through every scene, and that is who's being truthful and who's not. Betty, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. It's kind of interesting what Steve was saying about it's being dated. I was thinking about how they used a typewriter and not a computer, and they had those old black clunky telephones, and not even the portable phones. You know, I didn't expect them to have cell phones, but not even the portable. So it kind of some of those things reminded me of what it was like decades ago. And but I thought the movie was very good. And as far as I also felt, as far as the morality and the right thing, I think you could argue it 2 ways. So I thought it was. I think there's probably be a lot to discuss tonight.
I hope so, and I look forward to hearing more from you about how do you see things 2 ways when you're the omniscient observer and the uber critic, because you know where the bones are buried.
Well, I loved it. I loved it, Jim. I love I've seen it. I didn't see it just recently. I've seen it before at least 3 times because I thought it was fabulous, and I found myself rooting for Paul Newman all the way. I mean, I just had the feeling he was gonna make it, you know.
Yeah. Did you have a problem with him in the beginning because he was just a falling down drunk and selfish?
Well, he had gotten to that point.
Yeah.
He had gotten to that point.
But why were you willing to get past that with that character, with him?
Why?
Yeah.
I just felt there was something more to him. And when he started working with what's the guy's name? I forget the fella's name. Nick.
Jack Gordon?
Yeah.
Nick.
Jack Gordon, yeah. There was something he wanted to get better. I mean, he wanted to find himself again, I guess. And I think he didn't like where he was, and he was trying to figure, how am I going to get out of this? You know, he never said it, and he never acted it, but it was always there, like, I can do this. I can beat these guys. These guys are, you know.
I think you nailed it there. His performance is just so terrific because he accomplishes so much without words, especially before he's committed to her. You know, the scene when he visits her in the hospital and takes pictures.
Yeah. Oh,
that's where he finally says, "I'm her lawyer."
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of his conversion. That happens a half an hour into it. So you spend the first half hour of the film, you know, watching him struggle to even lift a finger to get this job, which is a slam dunk and will make him some money.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Carol, did you have a comment?
Hi, and happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Yeah.
Happy Hanukkah.
You asked a question, Jim, about two things. One is your question, did it bother you how he was a fall down drunk at the beginning? And the question is an interesting one. Bother us? I think it's a complicated question. The character is presented to us playing a pinball machine and guzzling straight shots of something, some brown alcohol. And that's who we're being introduced to. As far as bothering me, the viewer, I don't drink brown alcohol shots, but I have some loved ones in my orbit who have had issues with drinking, addiction, compulsive things. And I have developed compassion. Being bothered is because it is all so troubling. I believe it's not just choice. If someone has the propensity and is in the throes of all that to the degree he was. So before I knew his story and the divorce and the cases and all of the downward journey, I had compassion, but I wanted to know more: how, why, what. And that's not the problem. That's the complex character who's got this issue. What was a little problematic relating to that issue of alcoholic drinking was, yes, when those Polaroid photos started to develop, it seems that's when he morphed into his awakening. But the transition from a boozy drunk to a sipper of a drink when his new lady lawyer love, he didn't know, was asleep. He took a sip of something and left the glass. All we saw about his drinking before that was down the hatch and at the bar. So it was I think there was a lot left on the editing floor.
Okay, we'll never know. But it's interesting you said that was his moment of change. There are changes beyond that, you know, and we'll get into it later after everybody's had their say about what's his motivation. You know, yes, he's trying to accept his obligation. I'll come back to that. So let's keep going around the windows.
At one time, Jim, wasn't he a really terrific lawyer?
No, he never really.
He never was ever a good lawyer. I got the feeling he might have been in.
Well, you don't really know. You don't really know.
No, we don't go into that. I know. I just wondered if maybe it was a hidden.
I watched that scene several times where Jack Warden is telling the backstory. Excuse me, I think we have a guest. Hello. Yeah. A lot of people are having that problem. Give me your email and I'll send you the link.
I didn't know what the movie was until 3 hours ago.
Oh, you hadn't seen it yet?
Roz Rabo or Roz Kaufman or Roz?
I saw it years ago, several times.
Okay, I'll send it to you. Hold on.
You know, I thought it was interesting that he was so anxious to succeed in this that he even went and he broke through the mailbox of.
Well, that you're getting ahead of it. Let's go around the room and get everybody's take. Fern, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I don't want to cut off this, these subtle conversations and the nuances about morality that we're all going to get into. But I do have to comment at the outset that Paul Newman is the character is whatever you think about his acting, he remains Paul Newman, you know, the stoic guy with the blue eyes. And you forgive him a lot of stuff from the outset because he's Paul Newman with the blue eyes.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
Thank you. That was the point of my opening question. Is it, do we stay with him because he's Paul Newman, or because
yeah, we do. Absolutely.
It's hard to resist, let's face it.
You know,
and he's got to go somewhere from here.
that's right. It's 40 years and he still looks, you know,
He's still Paul Newman.
Yeah.
Although, if you know, I do recommend there's like a 4-part series of his
Oh,
life.
it's wonderful.
Yeah, and he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he
was actually. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh.
if he was an alcoholic at that time. He was very good at it, as some can be. But he's a lot of that was speaking from personal experience. So he's using his sense memory of moments when he was beyond normal and invoking that as a performer. I think it was a very studied performance, and I want to call attention to some of the moments. I'll have to get back to my pad for that. But who else? Natalie, you wanted to say something about your impressions? You're muted.
Yes. Okay, here I am. I was more impressed with the evil of the Catholic Church. And that was, to me, the big thing in this film, and how wealthy they were. When you see they had 12 lawyers to protect anything that they did that was wrong. And I also would like help on the in the trial. It went by way too fast, but there was a Jewish guy in the front.
Yes.
When he was picking, and it went by too fast. Something about, I'm a Jew, how could I be in this jury? But what did they actually say? Because I was...
Oh, he said, I'm Jewish. Of course, I've never attended that hospital, but I have been in other hospitals.
Oh, so that wasn't anything good or bad, because I think the big thing was the church, how the church had, it was, you know, this church who was supposed to be God and good and moral and all, were just the opposite of all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Shown in this film. To me, that was what he was fighting against up to the end. And that it was, he had nowhere to go at the end anymore with the logic of the law and the power of the church, and how beautifully it ended, that he now could appeal to the goodness and the heart of human beings that just come in with you when you're born, more than with reason or example, that some of us have this feeling of wanting to do good in this earth. That's what I thought the film was about.
He appealed to their inner mensch.
Right.
Okay. Regarding the Jewish man and the jury, that scene had a purpose, and that was to show how he failed at the jury interviews. Oh. And a sign of his fall from grace. Now, somebody commented on, was he a great lawyer before? He was a young lawyer in a firm, and we learned that when Jack Warden has a sandwich dinner with Charlotte Rampling, and he's standing in for Newman because Newman has to go do something regarding the case. Oh, he's just had bad news, and he goes to see the doctor, and then he goes to see the judge, and he's just the door is shut on him. And it's kind of blurred. I listened to it 3 times, and I finally figured out that the law firm he was working for as a younger lawyer, had a big case, but one of the partners felt they needed some insurance, so he bribed a juror. And he went to the partners of the firm and said, I'm going to tell on you this. I'm going to go to the board of lawyers, to the bar, and reveal this. And they beat him to it because they laid the finger on him as the briber. And he was in jail for a day, and he called the firm up and said, okay, I'll retract my charges. And he was released immediately. And then they fired him. And that was the beginning of his spiral. Divorce, alcoholism, no accounts, couldn't keep his own business, his own practice going. That got a little lost in some muddy dialogue, but that's the backstory. He wasn't always a drunk. He was probably a decent lawyer because it was a prestigious firm, They had the moral lapse, not he. He tried to do the right thing and he got punished for it. Does it make sense?
Yep.
And then the punishment was so severe, he said, how can I do good in this world? I've just been sacked unfairly. So, he became a victim of their evil. It was the victimhood. So
he was a guy who did, however, when there were choices to be made, even small choices, he made some crappy choices. He chose.
Absolutely. We'll get to that. That's later on.
Even when he tried the mail or whatever, he chose.
Everybody in this film has a evil streak or an amoral streak.
Amoral, I would say.
Amoral. And sometimes circumstances make them go there and act on that. And they're powerless, just like he's powerless to stop drinking. He's powerless to do a lot of things.
No. You're saying sometimes circumstances make him. He made choices at each
that got him there. Okay.
No, at each point, one makes choices.
Yes, I totally agree. But he's clearly a downtrodden man.
Yeah, but he makes bad choices.
Okay, no excuses for that. I guess I'm trying to forgive him for the bad choices, but
he's got eyes, so I forgive him for everything. But...
Well, Charlotte Rampling nails him in that scene. It's a lovely scene where she says, "I can't invest in failure anymore." You sound like a kid who comes home Sunday night and says, "Mom, write me a note so I don't have to go to school." You gotta be, man up and do this, and don't come to me because she's had a rough life of her own. We don't have to cover that right now. So who hasn't spoken up? Jeff.
Yeah. So to me, I disagree with Steve. I didn't find the movie dated at all, in the sense that what it was kind of speaking about was the moral failure of institutions and a loss of trust in institutions. The church was just one part of it, but the whole legal system and lawyers and marriage. I mean,
and doctors.
Institution, and the doctors, yeah. Right, the hospital.
I wasn't saying all the issues raised were no longer relevant. I was saying that they raised the issues were a little
There's relevant. A very interesting essay in Salon today. Some essayist said when people are down, they make bad choices. And at some point in their lives, everybody's down. And if you're an unemployed white male Christian in Iowa, you're sick of, seeing the success of the world pass you by and ignore your plight. So of course you reach out to charlatans like Trump, and you take bad chances, because the feeling is, what do I have to lose? I need something extreme to save me from this horrible plight I'm in.
So if I can finish what I was saying, I was trying to say that the institutions failed, but in the end, the jurors who were not an institution overrode kind of the people somehow emerged triumphant against the institutions. Even the judge was totally corrupt in the case. So that to me, it wasn't about, it was about people versus, the institutions in the society and the moral failings of what happens to these institutions that we put so much trust in.
Well, I think you're right. But, institutions have an institutional culture, but they're built by individuals, by followers. And I like your overview. Absolutely, it's correct.
But I think in the end, if I've worked for enough institutions that they almost take on a life of their own.
Yes.
They become their own kind of organic entity, bigger than the individuals who comprise it. The sum is bigger than the parts.
Right, but sure, we can look at it from a distance with that wide lens and say all these institutions are corrupt. The church, religion, the courts, the lawyers, the doctors, I look at it more personally because this film does go pretty deep into each character. And that's to Mamet's credit. I'm not ordinarily a fan of his, but I think he really does an exacting examination of the personal failings of each person when they go along with that institutional dysfunction. Who else needs to speak up? Marina, hi.
Most of my ideas were already expressed. I agree with Fern that no matter what Paul Newman does, we still love him and we want him to succeed. And even when he's chasing ambulances, we know that it's just a phase and he will be redeemed very soon. So we're on his side. I also think, as Steve, that the movie is a little time-stamped and not by the ideas, but the tempo, the style, the way it is shot. But it doesn't mean we don't love it. I enjoyed watching it. I keep thinking about it. I want to rewatch some of the speeches, and I told my husband about it. So thank you for recommending it.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Jerry, did you want to say something? You waved your hand. Or were we saying hi to Roz?
I was just saying hi to Roz.
Okay.
Hi, Carol.
Hello, Jerry.
Hi,
Hello, Jerry and Roz.
Hello,
Okay.
everybody.
I'm going to excuse myself for just a second and get my notes, and we'll go through the film more thoroughly. Hold on.
Is anyone else in this class going to Academy screenings?
Oh, how do you do that?
Be invited. I'm on the widows or widow and widowers green sheet. They do a very gracious thing. They let us spouses of Academy members still be welcome to come with one guest to Academy screening. So your whole life as you knew it doesn't stop on a dime.
That's sweet.
That's very nice. Yeah.
Okay, I'm back shaking my latke haze because I just got up from the table after having eaten too many latkes. But they were very good this time because we ground the potatoes very fine, finer than usual.
Do you use the Cuisinart or you do it by hand?
Cuisinart machine.
Jim?
Yeah.
The woman who is hired by the firm to spy on Paul Newman, develop a relationship. Does she actually fall for him or does he fall for her? It was not clear to me.
Well, it's up in the air because neither one has been able to come clean with the other. She's burdened by her espionage.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he is burdened by his unreachability, his self-obsession with this case and with his downfall and, you know, the threats to him. He doesn't see her, although he comes back to her for reassurance. You know, it's like any port in the storm and she's the closest port. I didn't mind the vagueness of that.
I think she's him at the end of the film.
But when she says to him,
don't go there yet, Jeff.
when she says to him,
okay,
I'm tired of being with losers.
Yeah.
It seems to me that she's fallen for him, but she wants him to stand up.
You're absolutely right. But you can't say, I really like you and I want to help you do better. She's saying, stand up on your own, you loser. You know, I've had it with you guys who just, you know, come to women for sympathy and an occasional love pat. And, you know, you won't do anything to help yourselves. She's using him as a victim.
Well, she's stabbing him in the back, right?
Right. Well, that's part of the amazing part of this film is that she gets to be more morally observant than he, while she's very deceitful. You know, and that's, you know, she spends the last half hour of the film trying to tell him what she's done, and he brushes her off because she doesn't matter to him. You know, there's part of this film that say it again, Steve. You were breaking up on us. Steve, can you say it again?
I said, yeah, he does more than that. He punches her in the face.
Right. It hits her.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah, we can hear you now.
I
Right,
said he does more than that. He punches her in the face at the end. So obviously they had fallen for each other, and then he felt betrayed.
Yeah.
The gender issues raised in this movie, a la 1982 or whatever it is, are very interesting.
Yeah.
Compared to now, right? I mean, on the one hand, there's a strong feminist statement at the end, right? In the trial, the nurse who finally shows up.
Yeah.
So who are these men to ruin my life?
Right. I wanted to be a nurse, right? Yeah.
So that's a good, strong feminist statement. On the other hand, Charlotte Rampling is not exactly a great feminist role. Of course, punching her in the face nowadays probably wouldn't work out real well for Paul Newman. I don't think he would have been at the trial. It's just interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it wears its age. At the same time, I think you have to judge it for its own era. It was made in 82. Only where were they? Some people had touch tone phones, and other people had rotary dials, like Newman in his office had a rotary phone in his office and his home. And I forget where I saw a touch tone phone, but so that was the early 80s, in case you missed them.
But also Charlotte Rampling in her hotel room at the last scene.
Yes, right.
Brings the dialing phone on her belly with the room service food.
Right, yeah.
Can I just say that I agonized and rooted for him? Don't answer it. Don't answer it. And that objective correlative happening with every subsequent ring. It was so powerful. It was so triumphant. He was growing past the past. It was great.
Well, at considerable cost.
Oh.
He's tempted to answer it, but he can't.
He's not.
It was a great ending. I have to admit it.
Great.
And I was going to save this for the end, but what that represented to me was that he tried to do the right thing. He did do the right thing. There was a cost to pay for it. Right? The cost was losing her. But he was so betrayed.
Goodbye already yet.
But did he care that much for losing her? Did he care for her that much, did you think?
Well, relationships can change, if there's a little bit of forgiveness, or, I'm not rationalizing, but I think the feeling we're meant to feel at the end is, this is the price of virtue. You give up something you might have wanted because the virtuous act was more important to you. He had to do what he did.
She was a viper. She betrayed him. She wasn't worth wanting.
No, he was so he was so disappointed in the
right. He was crushed. No question.
He didn't see it himself. He didn't see what she was doing. He just
nobody did until Jack Warden, lifted the envelope out of her purse.
Yeah.
She betrayed not only him, she betrayed his cause. She betrayed the woman in a coma. She betrayed all of them.
Well, she knew how important this was, and for her to have done that was so awful.
The snake.
Well, she was desperate herself. Consider her backstory.
Yeah.
She had been a lawyer. She was divorced, and she wanted to get back into lawyering.
Yeah.
And Concannon was a friend of a lawyer she worked for in New York.
Can I ask a question, please? There was ambiguity for me, Tim, and classmates. When Paul Newman hears the line in court, I couldn't make out what he was, the other man was saying, which the other lawyer was saying was, it's sort of like you get up there and you're relieved it's not a Jew, or you expect it to be another Jew, or that line about being a Jew.
I remember.
The stand he takes, he's not a Jew. And was it surprise, alarm? What was the lead to that?
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I wondered about it too, and I went back.
I went back
to it to listen to it.
I couldn't get it.
Okay, I'll answer that with another question. Why do you think the doctor who gets bought off by Concannon has a Jewish name? Dr. Gruber with the Jaguar and the big cigar. Dr. Gruber.
I didn't pick that up.
Well, that was his name, and he got
Catholic hospital. I wouldn't have suspected.
No, he didn't work in the Catholic hospital. He worked in Mass General. It stated he pleads to the judge or somebody. My star witness, a doctor from Mass General, is going to testify. So he
was very passionate about punishing the bad doctors. And then he disappears to the Canary Islands.
So he becomes as guilty as the doctors, doesn't he? Because he doesn't participate in justice. Let's go back to the moment when Newman is walking out to his car. Well, it's the revelation that Gruber says to him, they killed her. There's no question about it. They should have known better. They betrayed the hospital and their church. And Newman is kind of surprised they did. I just wanted you to testify so I'd win the settlement quickly. But they get to the car and Newman says, why are you doing this? And the doctor's in the car. Newman even opens the door for the doctor to get into the car. Really, solicitous move. And the doctor says, I just want to do the right thing. Don't you? And then Newman doesn't quite get it. He just jumps up and down for joy because he gleefully realizes I won the case. So even he is not quite cognizant of what he stepped into. So it's one of those rich details, character vignettes. That's why that existed. I'm a Jew was in the courtroom. It was he just said, I'm Jewish. I wouldn't have been in that hospital. There was another Jewish reference. Friedman was the lawyer who wanted to go to the Caribbean on his vacation. And Concannon says, no vacations this week. Oh, and by the way, you can go to your friends at he says GBH. That's the public television station in Boston. He said, let's get something from them on this. Friedman, media, this was intentional. No, I'm sorry. So, he has all these, I'm not calling Matt an anti-Semite, but he's playing on all the tropes. And how even a conscientious Jewish person who just wants to go on vacation with his wife can be had. All those lawyers in the room, including Billy, his henchman, they're all bought and paid for. And Concannon is the savviest one. Then that scene where he's writing the check out and he's talking about the price of things and you don't know it's her. He says it pays for our pro bono work. It pays for this case. It pays for the staff, my bourbon, and it's like everybody's in on the take. So there are two voices in the film. There's Rooney, the nurse, who says, you guys are all the same. And the husband, I forget his name, says, you guys are all the same. Take, and it's like, it doesn't really sink in until Newman realizes I really screwed up because I didn't take the deal. I wanted to win this case for my glory, and see it through. I didn't want to settle it, because I needed this case for my redemption. He wasn't quite won over to, I want to win this for her. I need this case for me. And that's his egotism. Now, it doesn't last throughout the whole movie, but I'm saying that's his big conversion. When he stops doing it for himself, and that's after, of course, he turns the offer down of $210,000 in the judge's quarters. And it takes him a while to get around to that. I'd like to run through moments in the movie if we can, unless anybody else has something to say now. Jeffrey, you had something? Fern.
Yeah, I didn't want to not mention the theme of racism that there is.
That's a wonderful, go ahead, tackle it now. It's a great scene.
It was an extraordinary scene, and it was, a clear, on top of everything else, he threw in the fact that it's not just a corrupt system, it's a racist system, and he was part of a racist response.
Yeah. What happens was he lost his Gruber witness, the Jewish doctor, and they go to the list and Warren picks this guy he's closest, not knowing that he's black.
Right.
So Newman goes to meet him at the train, and he this good-looking white guy walks past him and he thinks, oh, I thought that was the doctor. And then he turns his back. And the black man, the doctor, walks past him and then says, are you Frank Elvin? And the look on his face, Newman's face, realizing I've got a black witness in 1982 Boston, is so telling. It's so great. And then he tries to make nice of it. He oh, no, you're going to stay in my department. I got to take care of you. And he picks up his suitcase. But the tell was there, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then
it was. It was, but on the other hand, the black doctor was really a good guy and knew medicine. And so in that sense, it wasn't totally racist. The system was racist, but the doctor himself was terrific.
Well, he was victimized. He always told the truth as far as he could tell it. And that's why he was so complacent under Mason's cross-examination in the trial. Well, if you put it that way, yes, But the interesting thing is that when they did research onto Dr. Thompson, Billy reports to James Mason all his lack of credentials and how many malpractice cases he's tried. And he says, and he's black. And with a smile, like, nobody's going to buy a black guy, 1982 Boston, nobody's going to buy a black doctor's testimony. And Mason turns really serious because he's the PR master. And he goes up to Billy and he says, never mention that, never make light of it, ignore it. And by the way, have a black attorney sit at our table.
And by the way, he makes mincemeat of him on the stand.
He does. Oh, yeah. And it's because he knows he can. If it had been a white doctor with the same lack of credentials and, as old and feeble and victimizable, he would have done the same thing.
But so wait a second. It's the judge that makes mincemeat of him. The judge begins to, the judge begins to attack him and suddenly takes on the role of the prosecutor and to show you how corrupt the legal system was, that the judge did that in a courtroom.
The judge would have done that if it had been a white person too. It's not because he was black.
No, I don't think so.
No, you don't think the judge was in the pocket of Concannon?
Oh, he was in the pocket. He was in the pocket, but it was even worse because it was a black guy.
Of course it was worse because it was a black guy.
Yeah. But there were a couple other obvious racist remarks too. Jack Warden, Mick refers to the doctor as a witch doctor.
Sure, it was the vernacular.
It's actually just about the same sentence as he does the anti-Semitic trope. Well, at least he wasn't another Jewish doctor.
Yeah, it's like two
racist comments.
Female employees were called the girl, regardless of age. It's like this was the era, and I don't get outraged at it because it's truthful to the era, but it's also telling, it's verisimilitude. So you can't blame it for what it can't, because it can't be otherwise. So you have to accept the time, warts and all. Betty.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to what you were saying before, that originally he was moving forward with the case for his own glory, and I think we've kind of said we all love Paul Newman, and we kind of all expected that at the end of the movie he was going to win and it was all going to work out well. But that said, in real life, was he really doing the ethical thing by what he did? Because the sister and her husband had hired him. They wanted money to take good care of the sister, and by taking on this case, going against the heavyweights, did he he really didn't in real life. He wouldn't have stood such a chance of winning. And so did he really make the right decision? Because had he lost the case, there wouldn't have been the money for the there wouldn't have been the money to take care of the victims. So on the one hand, it was great the way it turned out, and that the doctors and all that they were doing in the hospital, all the corrupt people, that it all came out. But realistically, had it not gone that way, did he do the right thing by taking this case when they said the sister said, we don't really want to go to trial? And would have just wanted to, settle it quietly and make sure there was money to take care of the sister. Yeah. So that's what I was saying before. I think you could argue it both ways.
No, he did not respect the wishes of his clients.
Yeah, exactly.
He was duty bound to consult, to take the offer to his clients legally, and he did not. He acted, without their consent, which could get him disbarred.
It would get him disbarred. That's why he was so hysterical.
Yeah.
Not because he didn't get the money for them. He was hysterical because he failed to convey an offer that was then withdrawn. And it's just grounds for disbarment. And he got completely freaked.
I don't, if you're referring to his hysteria, it's like the panic attacks where he's having trouble breathing later in the film. That's because he thinks he's going to lose. And he realizes, I really fucked these people over. But it's I
don't think it's because he realized he fucked them over. I think it's
both. It's both.
It's both, probably. Because
it's both.
In large part,
I think he realized he committed malpractice and he screwed him over.
Yes, right. So either way, he get disbarred.
Right.
But again, this was a personal, it was like a personal jousting at windmills to redeem himself when the fate of so many other people were at stake. Even when there were antagonists acting against him, Charlotte Rampling, James Mason, even his friend Mick was going to say, this is the last referral I'm going to give you. I'm done. When people hit rock bottom and they're plagued by addiction, a lot of people abandon them. But Jack Warden couldn't, because he sensed that spark of life in Newman. He said, I need your help on this. You got to do it with me. You got to help me fight this. So maybe Warden, agreed because of their long history together. He was his law professor. There was a passing comment about that. And Warden did plenty of things that were not legal as well. Those calls with illegal names, trying to track down Caitlin, and there were others. But let's move. Oh, Roz, you haven't spoken up yet.
I was going to say that it really jolted me when I saw him go into her purse and take the
right.
I thought that was violating.
Yes, it was.
I mean, and they sort of let that go. It made the movie.
It's a plot point. It hinged on that, his knowledge. The rest.
He was looking for
a cigarette.
Right.
He wasn't searching her purse. He was looking for cigarettes.
No, he
just jumped at him.
But to do it, he had to go into her purse. And that is the betrayal of her trust. You see, it may be a finer point, but for somebody who was chastised by taking notes out of a girl's purse in 7th grade, I learned the hard way that you don't do that. It's
also, when Paul Newman opened up a phone bill, that was definitely illegal.
So do the ends justify the means?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we all agree that we're glad he did that because he was seeking justice. But, in a nation that says it lives on the rule of law and everybody's equal under the law, we certainly have plenty of conflicts with that today. And, some people get away with things that others couldn't because they're not as famous or wealthy.
Or they moved to Florida.
They moved to Florida. Well, especially if they have a 150-room mansion and a golf course to play with.
But I think that it was fighting against some of the stereotypes. So, for example, the notion that the black doctor just was not going to be a very good at his field, when it turned out, in fact, he was quite good. And knowledgeable about anesthetic. And the woman nurse who finally came in and gave the testimony, that had to be so difficult for her, but it's like she felt that she had to confront these very powerful doctors, and she's the one that really took them down.
Yeah,
it was
she's the
her
hero.
testimony. So these stereotypes that we have of how the black is presented or how women are presented, it kind of gets a little turned on its head because the powerless turned out to be very powerful.
Yeah. Well, this film was written when David Mamet was still a liberal. I'm glad somebody laughed at that. But you're right. But by the way, that nurse who testified is Lindsay Krause, a very fine actor, and she is David Mamet's wife.
Oh.
Yeah, and it has been for decades. How she puts up with him, I don't know. But
is she still a liberal?
He's become quite conservative.
No, she.
I
was
don't
just being funny.
I don't know. You know, somehow they're still married. That's all I know. And Zoe Mamet is their daughter, and she's performing now, I believe.
Sasha Mamet.
What's her first name?
Sasha, like my grandma.
Sasha Mamet. I'm thinking of Zoe Deschanel. Okay, so let's try and pick apart some of these nice moments that the movie offered us up to us. We covered the funeral homes where he's clearly an ambulance chaser, does better at one than another. It's so funny. The first woman is stunned, and then the second family he tries to pass his card off to, won't have it, and he gets tossed out. There's a very important close-up when he's tossed out of the second funeral home, and he's on the street, and he stares out in the distance. Did that impact anybody? I read it as, what have I become? I'm a drunk. I'm an ambulance chaser. Has my life come to this? Somehow that's how I read his face. And we see that, I saw that look on him many, many times when he stops to examine what he's doing or what he has done. And he doesn't quite know himself yet, but he's coming to terms. And, the addicts say that you have to hit rock bottom before you can improve. And this is the phase he's in. He's doing it without a 12-step program. That was a very important moment. And did the window in his office have any special meaning for people? I kept drawing. This was some like civic building because the orange ceiling outside it. And he's got this little tiny hovel of an office, with half of a window, even though it's big. And to me, this says he's just like a church mouse hiding out in this great thing, this institution. And it's a symbol of access and a symbol of the denial of access. That's how I read it. Maybe it didn't strike you that way, but they kept they kept going back to it. The director and the camera person kept that window pretty prominent in many scenes. And they shot from a low angle, so that window grew even bigger again when the people were in front of it. And he has another lost look. When Jack Warner comes in and drags him onto the couch in his own office, he looks up and he says, "Oh my God, has it come to this?" He does this all without words. Now, here's another deception. He places a false sign on his door because he knows the client is coming in an hour, so he can go out and have a drink. And it's clever. He's smart enough to say, "Sorry, boss, I had to go out. Claire, woman's secretary name." So the guy's not stupid, or some liars are, but some are clever. And this is a sign of his cleverness.
Why did he have an office? What did he need an office for? He wasn't doing any business.
Appearances. Appearances. He was in denial. He hadn't had a case in 4 years. So it's a place to go and drink because it was near the bar that welcomed him.
All attorneys had offices.
But he had to pay rent at a place where that he wasn't even using. It was not like he was.
How did he pay for his apartment? How did he pay for the drinks?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I can't answer that.
He could have lived in his apartment had he had one. I don't know.
Every attorney had an office until COVID, whether you had one case or 100 cases.
It's always the hope that your luck will change. The great case will walk in your door. And Jack Warden walks in with this case that it's bound to be settled because the Diocese of Boston doesn't want the case to hit the press too big. They want to just shut it off right now. And the bishop says as much.
I just wanted to mention, to your point about his being clever, he was smart. They said he was second in his law school class, so clearly he was good.
Well, good people have problems too. You're right. Let's talk about the scene where he visits the hospital and he sees her. he misses her the first time. And then the second time he goes back, he knows where she is, takes the pictures. And the nurse says, "You can't be here." And he says, "I'm her lawyer. I'm her lawyer." And it's like, it rings, it's a strange sound in his own head. So it's not a triumphant defiance, or I'm going to get the right deal for her. It's like, oh my God, I'm her, all she has is me now. He's trying it out. It's trial action. It's an experiment in his new self. He does that so well, and it's written so well, because that's all he says, and you're left to conclude from his performance what he's feeling. Then he sees the clients and he gives them a sell job, which he's quite good at, right? Oh, you have a very good case, not a good case, you have a very good case, and I'm going to do all I have, all I can do, and I'm sure we're going to do really well with this, and it won't cost you a dime, because I get 30% if we're successful. And that's very reassuring. And he's taking advantage of the vulnerability of two stricken people. And, is it salesmanship or is it deception? He's trying to save himself by keeping the case in his office, by being the lead lawyer on it. Now, there's an interesting character. He's like the chief lawyer for the bishop. The guy has a bald head and he has a great voice and he's very prim and proper. And he gives the lowdown on Frank Galvin's career. You have to pay attention to him because he's the interlocutor. He goes between people, between the law firm and the bishop. And there's a very powerful scene at the very end of the movie where he says, "It's over now, Bishop. It's just, a matter of time. They're going to decide against him. There's no evidence that's allowed in court that can convict him." And the bishop says, "But what did you think? Did you believe her?" And then the guy doesn't answer, and he can't say, "She was so sincere, I'm worried." And the bishop gets it. I thought, all this is unspoken, because we're so deep into the plot and the behavior. We saw those performances. So we're convinced she was sincere and not lying, because we know she had to leave nursing and go be a preschool teacher, in New Jersey somewhere, or New York, because he took the shuttle, and, have a different career than she envisioned for herself. She's a caring person. That's why she's good with 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
But he seduces his way into her trust. He says, "Oh, my nephew's coming. I'm just checking out the school. And Mrs. What's her name, the headmaster, said you used to be a nurse." And then she sees the airline ticket in his pocket. So it's like, he tries everything. He deceives everybody in order to win the case. And I'm not sure, I haven't tracked it myself. When does it become not a selfish pursuit, but a sense of moral obligation to win this?
I think before that encounter with the nurse at the school.
Probably that was very late, somewhere. Let's keep moving on.
The whole thing is a David and Goliath story, right?
Yeah.
And if you're David, you'll take whatever steps you need to take to try to survive in a battle against the dragon.
But early in the film, it's a battle for his survival, not doing the right thing for the dead girl and her sister.
Yeah.
See, so it's a question of motivation, really, what's really going on, what drives him. And had he not realized how badly this woman had been treated, he might have accepted the $210,000, but he could, things were working on him, wearing against him.
His own shame built. I think his shame built throughout the movie.
Yes,
I thought.
right.
And so eventually, what started out as his own head trip and his own rejuvenation, if you will, or revitalization, it metamorphosed into something deeper.
Yeah. After that hospital scene, he meets with the bishop where they present him with a check. And the bishop has this beautiful speech about nothing can make up for what happened to this girl. It's a terrible tragedy. She was deprived of this and that, and nothing will ever make up for it. But here's a token of our effort to make it right. 210,000 easily divided by 3. And he listens to the pitch with doubt. He sees the check for $210,000. And he says, I can't do this because if I do this, no one will know the truth. That happens at 27 minutes in. If I take them, and then he says, if I take the money, I'm lost. So he realizes that there's something else in this for him. Maybe he doesn't know it quite completely yet, but it's not about setting himself right and winning a case so he can get other clients and, have a proper apartment and home and a business practice. And by the way, the numbers this is 40 years ago, those numbers were, at least 5 times greater in our dollars today, maybe more. I forgot to look up what the dollar of a value was then in today's dollars. So this was a big settlement. And, but if I take the money, I'm lost. That was so telling. And he says that it's like he's saying that to himself for the first time. He's thinking out loud in front of the bishop. And that was implicit in his performance, I thought.
That was probably the turnaround point for him.
It certainly.
When he turned that down, he suddenly thought, I can get more than that. Why should I?
But that was still a head trip. That was still his own head trip.
Why should I take that little sum, that paltry sum, when I can get a lot of money if I follow through?
What I mean is, it was going to be morally wrong for him to take the money, but he still wasn't thinking in terms of what the client.
No, that wasn't moral. Yeah,
it was about his
redemption.
Redemption.
His own personal redemption, and that's
what I meant when I said it was his own.
I don't think morality was in his picture at the time. I think it was just thinking that. I think that he suddenly had a moment within himself.
Yes, he did.
If I take this, I'm gone. But if I don't take it, I have a chance of redemption.
Well, I don't think you're wrong, Doris. It's that he's on a new journey. He's never done this much self-examination before.
Right.
It's new territory for him with himself. Brisa?
Well, I'm sorry that I had to miss the beginning, but my feeling was when he was watching the Polaroid pictures come to life, that's when he changed. By the time the 4th or 5th picture, whatever it was, came to life, he began to care about her.
Mm-hmm. I agree, but it's a long process. That I think what this film did beautifully was there's a slope where that's the beginning of the change.
That's the beginning.
In the next scene, he meets with the bishop, and that's where he says, no, the truth, if I take the money. So he's beginning to say, oh, this is the truth is the prize. Not the money. If I take the money, it means I've ignored the truth by letting these scoundrels get away with it. See. Okay, and then there's another interesting thing. Concannon is so smart. I mentioned this a moment ago. He plans for television and newspaper coverage of these good doctors. So he's mounting a public campaign, a legal campaign, and a religious campaign at the same time. So he's like the ultimate PR person, the damage control guy. Now, what did you people think of when she comes back to the bar the second time, or the first time when she says goodbye on her way out, and then she appears again? Did you believe it? Did you sense that she was a plant, or?
I thought she was a plant at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did
say manipulation.
I thought she was a plant. Oh yeah.
I didn't get that at all. I believed her.
Well,
until we saw.
I was suspicious.
Really?
I didn't think she was a plant, but I was suspicious. Why was she there?
The first time I saw her,
there's a woman in the bar. Out of the blue, there's this woman in the bar, looking at him. Nah, no.
Well, men can be blind sometimes, Doris. I hate to tell you. I know it's new to you.
He was hungry for a woman, I guess.
He was distracted.
It wasn't like she was some beautiful creature. She was just an ordinary looking person,
But he came over to her. He came over to her at the bar. She didn't come over to him.
So she played it really smart. She was coy,
She played Charlotte Rampling. That's why.
Charlotte Rampling, yeah.
Charlotte Rampling. She
on
was
her way out the first time. She says, "I'm really glad you had a good day."
Yes.
And so that got his interest up. I had no idea that she was a plant.
I didn't either the first time I saw it. But
I'm not that cynical. And also I have believed pretenders in my life and been, I can be duped.
Okay, a lot of us can. So let's move on. The second time he sees her, he says, "Come on, tell me the truth. Did you dump him or did he dump you?" And then they go to dinner. And it's a very important scene because he's musing out loud. He's saying these thoughts for the first time to anybody, let alone himself. Court gives the weak, the poor, a chance at justice. And those of you who've taken Stan's Torah study class, every year we come upon this verse that says, "Justice, justice shall you pursue." And it's this evasive goal we have, but you can't stop seeking it. And this is what he's realizing, that this is his mission. And then he says the jury wants to believe. So that's planting their ultimate verdict, isn't it? Because they want to do the right thing. And then he says in the same scene, "Maybe I can do something right." And she says, "Is that what you're going to do?" And he says, he kind of shrugs it off and doesn't know yet. The scene at the apartment after that, where they go back and, he pours a drink, he plants a kiss on her, and then they talk for about a second, and then she starts to unbutton her blouse. That was kind of weird for me. It's like, that never happened to me in 1982. But
so you put yourself in Paul Newman's place?
No, it's true. I don't have those blue eyes.
It didn't make me suspicious.
Yeah.
But when they so quickly, it was cut to his apartment and the blouse gets undone. She's looking at the not only disorder of his paltry living space, but it couldn't have been clean either. And she's immaculate, not only an unlikely barfly, but that's when she was so not eager and ready, but it just unfolded without resistance. It was as though that's what it didn't match, but I wasn't suspicious. It just seemed unlikely.
Well, let's say that she was kind of a blank slate throughout much of the movie, even beyond this moment. And I read her facial expressions as the actor telling herself, "I'm not comfortable doing this, but I have to do it." So that's why she's so stiff and why she seems so clinical and cold. That this is the only way she could go through this.
Pretending.
Yeah.
May I please?
It was uncomfortable.
May I?
Yes, of course.
She went to the bar with the purpose of picking him up. She went to his apartment. So these two acts are already big steps. So unbuttoning the blouse is already not that much.
It's a jump. Okay. All right. Well taken. So that's in the next scene after. So Galvin has to go to Gruber's house when Gruber doesn't show up Tuesday night, and he realizes that he's lost his witness.
Yeah.
And then he runs to the judge's house and says, "I need a continuance because I lost my witness." And the judge says, "Well, you want to be independent? Be independent now. Too bad." And he closes the door in his face, just the way Nurse Rooney does later on. So while he's out, Mick and Laura are doing, telling the backstory of Frank Galvin. And the next scene is Galvin's back in his office, and he makes that phone call. He calls and the law firm says, "I'm willing to settle now." And basically they say, "Too bad. It really was over when you left that office." And that's when he starts having his panic attack, his breathing, which he did a great job of.
Yeah.
Very painful feeling for the audience to see that. And he's breathing heavily like that against the wall when he calls Dr. Thompson, because Mick says this is the closest guy. And then we go to the rehearsal of Towler in Concannon's law conference room, which I thought was really brilliant. They're rehearsing their witness, 3 words maximum, cut to the point, don't be too detailed. And then he gets him so worked up that he smiles and says, "That's it," and he pats him on the face. And it's like, get emotional in the right way. Very, he's Concannon is showing off his legal skill, his prosecutorial skills. And you're right, Jeff, that the judge does question Dr. Thompson, and that's where we have the big argument with the judge. Goes into the judge's quarter, and that's after quarters, and he says, "I'm going to declare a mistrial." He said, "You'll have a mistrial, buddy, but we're going to try this case." And Galvin then asked the wrong question in court about, could brain damage happen sooner than 3 minutes? And he said, yes, it could happen in less than 2, letting him off the hook, the doctor off the hook. He asked the wrong question. You never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. And he goes back and he says, "It's over. I just lost it in that moment." When that doctor got to say, "Oh, she could have been brain dead before we stopped trying."
Because she was anemic.
Yes, before. Yes, that's right. That reveal. He didn't read the admittance form well enough to notice that.
Look at Carol's apartment.
And what are the parting words of Dr. Thompson? He says, "Do you want me?" They're outside, another low angle shot of the 3 of them. He says, "Do you want me to stay on?" And Newman says, "No, go home." And out of the blue, what does Dr. Thompson say? It's a great line. He says, "People have a great capacity to hear the truth." He doesn't elaborate on it more than that, but it lands home, I think. What he's saying is, you're fighting the right fight, and don't discount the jury's ability to see what's allowed, to imagine the case in a way that is more truthful. And then she greets him on the steps. He still doesn't know she's a spy. And they go back to, he goes back to his office, and Jack Warden's massaging his neck. And he says, "There are no other cases. This is the one." And he keeps repeating that. So I think that's the 50-50 way, where because he thinks he's lost, he's trying to pull himself out of the dumps and say, "I still have to fight this because it's the only thing left to me to do." And then we go to the scene where Mason gives her the check.
Wait.
What?
Did you already talk about the fact that I'm not going to be able to come up with names, but the black witness.
Yeah, Thompson.
The conversation of they won't care that he's black. They'll be happy that he's just not a Jew.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's a joke. Yeah.
Yes.
That Mick makes. Right. Yeah. Well, Boston, 1982.
Yeah, that's what I was. What's interesting? I saw this movie in its time.
Yeah, I did several of those.
And I didn't remember most of it. That scene struck home with me. That I remembered and knew exactly what was going to happen out of everything in the whole movie.
Well, sometimes
struck me as a young woman and stayed with me.
Yeah, one thing maybe you don't remember, but I can remember, I don't know if it was early 80s or not, there were riots in Boston in what they call the South Bay or the Back Bay.
Not Back Bay, South End.
South End on school busing. Right. And the white, angry young people and 20s and 30-somethings didn't want the schools to integrate. It was over busing.
Busing.
And it became very violent. It was an ugly, ugly part of Boston history. Mm. And I suspect this is very close to that.
Well, Boston was run, the whole archdiocese, Boston was run by the church. It was run by the church. we said the Lord's Prayer. I listened on the radio. Nothing was on the radio from 9 to 9:15 in the morning, except the recitation of what do you call it? The Hail Marys.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so from 90 minutes into the film, there's all this malfeasance that Mick and Frank Galvin do. It's their bad means to a good end. First, Galvin goes to the chapel where he intercepts Rooney, right, on her way out of chapel to get information from her. He says, I understand who you're protecting, and he names her. And then he says, I just talked to her. Talked to her? Yeah, this morning she told me she talked to you.
In New York?
In New York, No, she's not in New York. She was in New York, not Boston. So he got her location. Then that's where Laura tries to talk to Galvin and tell her what she's been up to. And then Laura has her own moment of, how do I broach this with him? I can't get his attention. It's one of those similar empty looks where the character is caught inside their own feelings and doesn't know what to do with it. Then the mail arrives, he gets his own phone bill, and he realizes Nurse Rooney is probably getting her phone bill today too. So he goes to her apartment, rips open her mailbox, finds her phone bill, and sees the
telephone,
not cell phone then, but the phone numbers. And that's when he reaches out to her, and on the phone he says it's a magazine subscription ploy, and he says, do you work at the Manhattan Child Care Center? And she says, no, Chelsea Child Care. So he knows where to go. And then he shows up at the playground with this ruse of, my nephew's coming to town next week. I'm looking at
ticket in the pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, these are minor peccadillos, but they're still doing the bad thing for the right reason.
Yeah.
So the path to redemption, even when it's not for your selfish reasons, but for somebody else, can lead you to do something, I don't want to say immoral, but something that you normally wouldn't do. And then there's a scene I cited. The bishop says, after the court, the jury is adjourned, the bishop asks his lawyer, did you believe her? And there's no answer. And the bishop looks very worried, And here's the thing, that's a moment of truth where the lie is exposed in the whole room, but nobody says anything about it. Because we are complicit in other people's complicity by allowing it to go on, by allowing their privacy to cover up these things.
Jim, may I just add something I was taught? I'm sure a lot of us were. Omission is commission.
Yeah. Well, like we say, the average German citizen was, their complacency was cooperation with the Holocaust. It's like, and by the way, some of you may have seen this. We looked at a gentleman's agreement probably 2-3 years ago, back at the university synagogue, where Gregory Peck pretends he's Jewish,
right,
to write an article on anti-Semitism. Wonderful film.
Yep.
And one of the summation speeches is, you people who would never commit anti-Semitism, but you allow it to continue, you're just as guilty as the others. He said it in a much better way than I can recall. Very powerful, because he witnessed it firsthand, and even splits up with his girlfriend over it. So it's that's a great film. None of us expected it to be that good, but it knocked everybody out.
It's a great film.
Yeah. And the summation, there's some wonderful points he says in the summation. Basically says here, we're all victims. We all see ourselves as downtrodden, weak. We pray to God to do the right thing, to have the right judgment here. He said, but today you are the law.
That was powerful.
Yeah. So we even make a fervent and frightened prayer. Oh my God, what religious person would say that's a frightened prayer? No, he nails it. We're afraid we're not going to do the right thing. So we're praying to do the right thing. And then, it's coming to the capstone lines. We have to have faith in justice. And to do that, we have to believe in ourselves. So he's talking around that issue of forget about the details, the technicalities of the law. Just believe in your gut, what you feel this woman's family deserves.
Yeah, and the judge had said to disregard all of her testimony, and obviously they didn't. So,
right, but he
never do.
He couldn't address it directly. You see, this is
the
writing. He goes above the details, and he says, "Just do what's in your heart." He doesn't say, "Ignore that man behind the curtain over there." He says, "Justice is in our hearts." And the problem for me was they never really cut to any of the faces of the jurors. They're kind of anonymous, and it's like, I get it. Lumet's, he can be a ham-fisted director, and then sometimes he overlooks opportunities. I don't know. You rarely saw a face of a juror. I mean, they file in, but it's a wide angle on all of them. Marina?
Maybe it didn't matter how the jurors looked or what they thought. Maybe they showed us the back of one juror when the lead character tried to interview him and blundered. And that was to demonstrate how unprepared the lawyer was. But I don't think the essence of the jurors mattered. They were just anybody, a person in the street without a character in this movie, but they could feel and sympathize.
So their reactions didn't matter. It was only the verdict that mattered, and that was their action.
We did see a panning. I only remember one of the entire jury. Yeah. There was one African American. It was not homogenous.
And there were 6 men and 6 women. I counted.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I think it's when they filed in and sat down with the verdict. And then after the verdict is delivered, they see each other across the rotunda there in the court building, and their eyes lock and they're just frozen. What do I do? What do we do? And then he moves on and he turns back and he looks again. She's gone.
Yeah.
And he looks torn. And then, we've talked about the scene where she tries to reach out to him again. There's something very interesting that cued me into this movie. Over the end credits, the music is choral and it sounds religious, Christian religious. And it justified that. In looking at the main title, I said, why is this in, Gutenberg's script? It's the script of an old Bible. That's what they were going for with the main titles. All those names and, producers and the cast, and this fierce red color lettering. And the script made it very hard to read. But this made it all make sense at the end because it's a churchy kind of movie. Right? It's justice is in your heart. And I found that moving and touching. And Lumet doesn't usually do that in his films, but certainly did it here. So that's kind of it. Are there any closing comments? Carol?
Saying Lumet, did you mean Mamet or are you saying Lumet?
Lumet, the director. This was the director's call.
Oh, because Mamet wrote it, right?
Yes, but the person who decides what the music should be and where it goes is the director working with his composer.
Was Mamet Jewish?
Yes. That's the whole point. He became an Orthodox Jew a number of years ago.
Oh.
And now he's like a radical.
Oh.
He's like, you can't talk to him. Oh. He gives off vapors, with his I'll leave it at vapors.
When you said it was church-like.
Yeah, listen to it again.
I know we've covered the theme, which I think is absolutely appropriately named redemption and doing the right thing, moral compass finding. Yeah. But if it's church-like, I'm trying to think who was or who were the sacrificial lambs. And of course, it was the wannabe nurse, now nursery school teacher, and also the patient.
Right. And the sister of the patient. And, these are the big losers in the film. Sacrifices. Yeah. Sorry. I mean, you're right.
I think the girl he was having a relationship with, she is totally at the end, all she's doing is drinking. you know.
Yeah, she's passed out in her bed.
Ruined. She's ruined.
That's why I'm saying she reminds me of him at the beginning of the film.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, they're very good. Yeah. You know, and he wants to answer the phone, but he can't because he knows.
Oh, I love that. He doesn't.
It's a very brave ending.
Terrific.
Lumet could have just had him pick up the phone and say yes in some way, but no, this was better.
Nope.
It was stronger, right?
Nope.
May not have been as satisfying, but it was stronger and more to the point.
Yes.
Of the cost of personal redemption is not necessarily beneficial to you. You have to do the right thing for the right reason.
But he did, and he grew up. He became that man. He didn't succumb to the temptation of anything. He sat with it, and with his accomplishment.
They're gains, but they're losses. You know, it's like you have to make the choice to be a mensch. You know, it takes work.
Just a little technical point about his not picking up the phone. They didn't have caller ID back then. And there were lots of people that presumably were calling to congratulate him. We knew that it was her, but, you know, it could have been anybody.
He was pretty sure it was her calling. Yeah, he knew.
He knew it was her calling. That's why he didn't pick up.
Yeah.
But
Marina, you had something to say?
Yes, we never mentioned that he was married to the owner of the daughter of the owner of the law firm. So in his career, he already kind of used a woman to climb up, and now it seemed like a woman was using him to climb back into the law.
Yeah,
we don't know that he didn't love her dearly.
We don't know if he used her, if it was just they had a romance and they got married, but it doesn't say that he used her to get a.
No, it doesn't say, but he started working in her father's firm.
So,
well, the
that
point
happens
is
all the time
that he had ambitions as a young lawyer.
I'm not that cynical.
Okay. Now, there's something I want to talk to you about. I just watched a film today. It's not a great documentary. It's 2 hour and 45 minutes long. And it ends with a big bang, really.
Oh,
gut punch. It's called The Levees of Monticello.
Oh.
After Thomas Jefferson died, his estate was a shambles. He was like bankrupt. They had to sell everything.
I thought it was excellent.
You saw it. How did you see it? On Kaiflix or
Kaiflix,
yeah. And so this Jewish naval officer from the North, you know, loved Jefferson because of his stance on religious freedom, and he became the lead suitor, and he bought the whole estate. And for 89 years, his family lived there. His son lived there, and his name was Uriah Levy, and the son was Jefferson Levy. And together, they each put a lot of personal funds into not only keeping the estate afloat, but restoring it, because it was just a mess. Restoring it as Jefferson intended. And that's interesting. It's kind of sweet. But then they hit a block. I think it was around 1810, not 1810. I forget when it was. Some politician's wife got a bug up her butt about the Jews who bought Monticello.
Oh.
Becomes a tale of anti-Semitism in the 1800s, before the Civil War. And this guy was a naval captain. He was the first Jewish colonel in the Navy.
He was very famous.
What?
He was very famous in the military.
Right. But
Levy.
So he was very, a very high-ranking naval officer. And there's even a chapel and a school named after him at the Naval Academy here. And so he bought it and just pursued it, put a lot of his personal money into it for years. And when he died, his son took over. And when the state fell behind, the son sold almost all of his personal holdings to keep it together. His son was a 4-time representative from Virginia. And so single-handedly, his family made sure that this state didn't crumble down or become something else. They fought for the preservation very actively. But the big betrayal is that there was a movement to take it away from them because these Jews, they were called Orientals, and there was a huge campaign of women, mostly, excuse me, ladies, who, wanted to purge the Jews of ownership, and they used code words for their campaigns. And it went to the Senate, and the Senate just shut them down, or it went to court, and they were shot down. They tried again 2 years later, and they were shot down again. But very shortly after that, Jefferson Levy died, and a trust was formed by New York businessmen and lawyers, maybe some were Jewish, who bought it and formed the Jefferson Trust.
Oh.
So
it's a good movie.
You like the reason? It wasn't too boring?
I did. No, I wasn't bored at all.
Okay. So my question to the group is, if I program it, would you see it?
Sure.
And I have to ask that because the synagogue will pay for it, but we'll have to pay a fee. And it's not onerous or anything, but I don't want to, otherwise you'd have to pay $10 each to log on to HiFlix. I know, Carol.
So how will we see it?
Well,
how would you see it?
You can join HiFlix, CHIFLIX or ICK.
I never
the
heard
website.
It's a
they
Jewish...
give you 7 days for free to try it out, or I can buy a license for our film society, and I'll get links for each of you to screen it for a week before.
Oh, that's good.
If you do that,
yeah.
If you do that, will we be able to watch more HiFlix films?
No, it'd be just for the one film.
Just for the one film.
And we would watch it on the computer, or how would that
online.
work?
You go online to
Television.
HiFlix, and you find the Levees of Monticello. It's a new film, and it's very emotional. It also centers in the back third on the University of Virginia and the white supremacist march on Charlottesville, saying Jews will not replace us. And they gathered around the statue of Jefferson on the campus of UVA. They didn't know that the sculptor who made it was Jewish. I mean, they were just cretins, those people. But it was emotional for us because my son was there at that time. He wasn't there that day. He was on his way home. But we were very fond of the campus. So it resonated. Who's been to Monticello?
Oh, we've been.
I had to raise two hands because I was there twice. Once when I was 8 and once when I was 70. And that resonates too.
That's right.
When I went in the last time, I went into the foyer and they said, "Oh, it's not as big as I thought it was when I was 8." And it's not a big place, but it's full of, it's so tasteful and logical. It's he was a Mason, I suppose, and an Enlightenment guy and thinker, despite being a slave owner. And the film, there's a wonderful Black woman who talks about, Jefferson was great and the Levees were great, but we can't get around the fact that they owned slaves. So you have to tell that part of the story to make it a true history.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the HiFlix films show up on
children
Netflix.
with Sally Hemings.
Yeah. So and they bring in the offspring that Hemings and Jefferson had. It's a big picture of 100 people. Once a year they have a picture there.
The family reunion.
They did a DNA test and in fact proved that they have Jefferson's DNA.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
the family didn't want them buried at the cemetery there.
Yeah. Oh, right. And one of the women in the family, was it his mother?
His mother.
His mother was buried on the grounds, and nobody knew her grave was there because it was enclosed and overgrown. And when the trust, it was discovered, I think in 82, and the trust 1982, and then they totally created a new marker and dedicating it to the Levees. It's a great story, and it shows you how far back anti-Semitism goes and how the tropes are the same. 120 years later. So I think it resonates with us today. I just wanted to ask. I mean, we're only 10 people now. And, normally we're 20-25 windows open. So I'm going to try and program that for the 21st of December, 2 weeks from tonight. Yeah, Carol?
I never got a notice. And even I called the temple, sent an email, never got a notice of what our film was for tonight. I was fortunate enough to talk to somebody before 5 o'clock closing, and they told me because it was on the website.
You didn't get my email on Monday?
No.
I'll have to check it.
It was on the website, though. Did you see it on the website?
I was told tonight by someone at the temple right before 5 o'clock that it was on the website, but I didn't go. But
okay,
I
I'm sorry.
didn't go to look there. I get everything else by email, including the Zoom.
Yeah, I send out these announcements.
Mine came in yesterday.
I did not get mine, Jim. Is there some way I can help with that?
No, they will not send out a targeted email just to the Film Society subscribers.
No,
I get everything else by email. Maybe others do too. I get the Zoom, I get the Wilshire Boulevard, but this particular time was the only time I did not get what film.
Well, blame me, because all the emails you've ever received about our films come directly from me. They do not announce.
So something I said?
No, I just either I forgot or I copied you wrong or you didn't get it.
I didn't get emails from Jim either. I look very attentively in the weekly bulletin from Wilshire Boulevard Temple. They send it out on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, I found what the movie was, because whatever they sent on Saturday had said that the movie to be announced. So on Wednesday, I found it in the bulletin.
Yeah,
and watched the movie yesterday.
Well,
I didn't get it from you, Jim, until Tuesday. So
because I sent it out on Tuesday. I was late.
Yeah, you sent it out late.
Yeah, that's one reason
why it wasn't there. But it's all right. We forgive you.
Okay, I will. Marina and Carol, I'll make sure that you are not omitted from my emails.
Thank you.
One of those things, they won't pay attention to us as an individual entity within the synagogue. And that's okay. And Betty comes to us through the hub, right? Yeah. but you're on the email list now.
Yeah.
The hub is
sometimes the technical things don't work out so well, but usually it all gets
I think they changed the link for our group. So the link I sent out in my announcement was not the one that worked.
It did not work, and it drove me crazy.
Yeah, no, you had to go to the bulletin, click on that new link to get to the sign-in page.
That's what I finally did.
Yeah. Okay.
I dropped you a note to say I can't get it, but I found it before that. So
good night, all.
Okay, well, this was a great discussion.
Great.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Happy Hanukkah, everybody.
See you in 2 weeks.
Happy Hanukkah.
See you next time.
Happy Hanukkah.
See you guys next time. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.